Hello and welcome to The Big Fight, where we are going to step aside from politics just for a short while. And the reason is there's a lot of concern, some would call it fear, some would call it misplaced concern in the entire startup arena. Remember, this was supposed to be one of the major engines that would take India to a position of dominance on the global stage. Outside the United States and a couple of other countries, India was considered the big innovation and startup hub. Starting small, but eventually going to become something that is going to really take India onto a very firm place on the global stage. Now, in just the last few weeks and months, that entire startup story started to have a couple of question marks put to it. It's not been the best of periods. There's been fighting between co-founders, there have been sexual harassment charges which have created a lot of ruckus. A number of companies have gone bust, others have had to do layoffs, valuations have gone down pretty much across the board. And then, of course, you had that case of a CEO of a startup actually being arrested, put into prison, which led to 70 others writing to the Home Minister and saying what exactly is going on here. So, was it a startup bubble? And if so, has that bubble burst? Or is it something that is here and here to stay and we shouldn't worry too much and these are teething problems that will soon get resolved? So let me introduce all of our guests out here, starting off by welcoming Swati Bhargav, co-founder of dotcom. Great to have you with us. Sohail Seth, managing partner counsel. It's good to have you back on The Big Fight, Sohail, after a period of 2 or 3 months. We've really missed you. Saurabh Srivastava is former chairman NASSCOM, chairman of the Indian Angel Network, knows more about the startup ecosystem than just about anybody else I can think of. But possible exception, Ivan Mehta out there, tech news editor at Huffington Post and other things. Great to have you with us. Dhawan Soni is the head of growth at MobiQuick, another really strong startup out there. Will be helping us shed light on what is happening. Ranjana Kumari, Director, Center for Social Research, will be shedding some light on whether there should be more women in startups and all those stories of sexual harassment and things like that also. And last but by no means the least is Mr. R. Chandrasekhar, the President of NASSCOM and therefore one of the key people who's going to be interested in driving all of this forward, as is Ravindra Krishnappa, angel investor and somebody who was a former board member of Stayzilla, of course a company that's been very much in the news. Was this a bubble or are these just teething problems that you should always expect?
Vikram, I don't think this is a bubble. A lot of people are drawing an inference that the bubble has burst because of a decline in the total quantum of funding which has come in from the VCs.
And a decline in valuations, layoffs,
and a decline in valuations flowing after that, and some of the startups closing down, and also some of the incidents that you have referred to, and layoffs in some of the startups. On the other hand, look at some of the data points in terms of the number of startups which are coming up. Look at the quantum of funding in the current year and the kind of maturity that we are seeing in the startups and the range of the startups.
Okay.
So I think we are actually seeing people coming up with better ideas, better formed ideas. And
a maturing of the ecosystem. Saurabh Srivastava, would you agree with that? Is it a more mature system right now?
I would say that all the things you talked about, sexual harassment, companies closing down, shutting shop, somebody being thrown into jail, for instance, funding going up, coming down, all of what you see tells you that you finally have a startup ecosystem. None of this happened.
People thrown into prison, why does that show that you've got a startup?
How is sexual harassment part of an ecosystem?
No, not ecosystem. What I'm saying is when you start to have lots of things happening across all kinds of dimensions, then it tells you that there are a lot of startups. You go back 10, 20 years, the only startups we had were in IT services. And at that time, you had very little of this pressure. Unless you have a lot of startups, you won't have a lot of startups fail. 90% or more of startups globally do fail. So unless you have enough of them, unless they've had some time to exist, you won't have a situation where they're overvalued, undervalued. Go back to 2000. The number of companies, startups in the US that got valued at 10% or 5% of the valuation was huge.
Okay. Swati.
See, I think when it comes to valuation, one can say that there was a slight bubble. I think there is some correction happening in the market, which is okay. Investors are also learning from it. The startups are also learning from it. But all the other things that we focus on in terms of the layoffs, in terms of the sexual harassment, in terms of the co-founders fighting, these are things that have happened for decades in many industries. So I think it's not right to say that, oh, just because it's a startup, why is it laying off? I mean, at the end of the day, startups have also done a lot of good work. The e-commerce industry did not exist in India if it were not for startups. And not only e-commerce, all the ancillary industries, there's employment, there's innovation. So I think startups are still going to be the engine drivers that, Prime Minister Modi thought of.
Very simply put, three things have happened. Startups were seen as sexy, were glamorized by people like you as well in the media. They were glamorized
How
by
is it
people.
always about the media?
Yeah, but it is. I mean, you guys build perception, most of it erroneous. So you glamorized this business. It was seen as the sexy thing. You got valuations perhaps which you didn't deserve.
Startups are sexy around the world.
This, to my mind, is a societal course correction whose time was inevitable. A. B. I think the sexual harassment issues, layoffs and all are now beginning to mirror the real world. Which brings me to my third point. Please don't treat startups, because you call them startups, as any distinct from either people, business or societal issues that they confront. They will confront the same three issues as any company would. The definition you give them is a startup, but don't, to my mind, cushion them and put them in that bubble. Because the moment you put them in the bubble, their analysis and their analytics will be completely off the charts, which shouldn't happen.
All right, let me come to you.
So see, how are we different? We're kind of like the big companies, only smaller, but there's a lot of chaos around us. And for evolution, chaos is required.
For evolution, you need chaos. India is a particularly chaotic country.
Yes, it is.
So is this therefore a really good place to have that entire startup ecosystem? Look, Indians are entrepreneurial. Indians are dynamic. Indians love jugaad, and Indians thrive in chaos. So that's one of the reasons why people say India is a wonderful place for a startup ecosystem to come. Outside the US, Silicon Valley, Israel, another country where you wouldn't think should be necessarily one of the startup hubs of the world, but it is.
I just want to make one quick point. India is a startup country. Look at Rahul Gandhi. He's been in startup mode since he became vice president.
All right. I was trying not to get into politics, so we'll try. Your great advocacy of Yogi Adityanath in recent days, and his new startup series about
advocacy of democracy.
So if you Vikram, if you look at startups, I think in a country, if you have large markets, if you have diversity, for instance, and if you have people who are inherently willing to be entrepreneurial, is an ideal place. So India, to me, is the second place after the US, where startups, the entrepreneurial system should really take off. There's no question.
You're saying, and this is really the big story, continues to be the big story next 10 years, 15 years. Do you agree with that?
So there are a lot of opportunities in India, but a lot of entrepreneurs think that they're Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, but it has taken 20 years, 30 years, 40 years for them to reach there. Indian startup system is quite young. There are problems like they don't communicate well. Their product is not yet, sharp.
I won't agree with that. I mean, see, we're constantly evolving, and you got to realize.
Sure, that's what I'm saying. We are evolving, so don't think that you're Elon Musk.
No. So here's the thing, right?
You're not Elon Musk yet.
But we're not
But it's not about being Elon
It's
Musk.
it's not about
How do
him.
you change things? Time doesn't change things. Doing things changes things.
No, let me-
All of us are struggling to make something new, make something better, and innovate on a daily
So
basis.
you're not Elon Musk, so are you likely to be swallowed up by Elon Musk or the equivalent? That's one of the big issues that startups are facing.
No, but Vikram, here's the issue, that there are very few countries of such scale as we are in India that have so many unmet needs. Many of our startups are really addressing needs that they shouldn't waste their time on. Can I make it a little easier for me to shop on Amazon? How important is that? And how differentiated is it?
For instance, I'll take an example.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, the one reason why startups stand a little differently from most others is that they are, by definition, going to have a higher failure rate. So failure and closure is a part of life. The challenge that we are seeing particularly is, it's hard to begin a startup in India, but it's much harder, almost impossible to close it down gracefully. Regulatory barriers to closing down gracefully, as well as a lack of maturity in knowing when to close down, I think are behind some of
Okay,
the
so let me now
problems that we
just try
see.
and move ahead to some specific aspects, right? Let me just dive into each of them.
So let me come in, because just like the startups, women's voices are very, very meek and in the margin. Even in this panel, I think I got the last and the least
She
of
spoke,
the
you're the second person who spoke.
Let me interrupt that itself
let me just bring some attention to what these startups are all about and what kind of ecosystem they are representing and what kind of so for example, majority of them are in the tech sector. When you look at the startups,
necessarily.
majority.
Not
But when
necessarily.
you look
Not
at
anymore.
when you look at micro enterprise, small enterprise, medium enterprises, then you see that they are very, very few. And recently, when you look at the kind of, so what is it that women are really lacking? Why women are not getting there? They are only about 9% when you look at the overall picture. And also, when it comes to credit access. So only 3% women got the credit last year.
No, so are you saying that there's
so
hang on, I'll just
Yeah.
ask you two questions.
Yeah.
Are you saying that there is systematic discrimination against women in startups in India right now?
Well, I would say yes, and I would say there is not enabling
agree?
environment.
I don't agree with that.
No,
I don't agree
okay,
with
I
that
don't
at
agree
all.
with that.
Maybe.
I
I'm
am
on the
a,
board of Go Parties. That's a startup.
Fine,
It's founded
fine,
by a woman.
Fine, okay.
And her
I
brother.
think perhaps,
I am a woman
perhaps
entrepreneur
Suhail
who has
has been doing
raised
too many
funding.
parties, so maybe he's on
No,
the
no, it's
board
a
of.
startup.
No,
Maybe because
startup.
but let
there are
me-
a couple.
But hang on,
I'm
no,
allowed
let's
to say
hear
that
it.
in
let
English
me
it's a
prove my
startup.
point.
But
what I'm
Ranjana, hang
trying
on,
to say.
she's running a
Fine,
startup.
no,
Let me
maybe-
ask her whether she
Exactly.
thinks
Well,
it's discrimination.
Indira
This is
Gandhi
what
was one of
happens,
the
right?
examples in politics, and there are 9 chief ministers who are or prominent women leaders in politics who are examples. But when you look at the real overall women's
Yeah, yeah.
represented, and also in terms of employment,
No, no, hang on,
you
hang
know
on.
how
See,
many
this is
women
what
are
happens.
really
Yeah,
getting
but hang on, hang on,
employment in these
One thing,
startups.
one thing.
You know, so
Let
those
me
are the
just address.
questions.
Let me just see whether
There
there's.
is-
They are
Let me
supposed
just
to
see
change the
whether.
ecosystem.
See, so firstly, I am exactly the kind of a woman that you're talking about, right? These women who are not able to raise funding, these women who are in the startup. But what happens if out of respect I keep quiet, I'm considered to be meek? I'm just out of respect letting somebody complete their point. So women
you
are
are.
very often misinterpreted as being weak and meek in not making their point. So that's
Who
one.
considers
The-
you weak and
Who
meek?
thinks
Not
that
other
anymore
women.
these days?
Yeah,
Especially
nobody
in the
should,
startup world.
because it's not even true, right? And the
I mean,
second thing
especially
is
some of the
that
allegations that are
She
going
proves
around
my
right now.
point. Women are considered weak and
I mean,
meek.
some of the
No,
allegations that are going around,
I-
some of the allegations, I don't want to refer to them too much detail, are exactly the opposite, by the way. But anyway.
Yeah, so I think that as a woman entrepreneur, right, and actually looking at the investors also in India, I don't think investors are biased saying that, okay, she's a woman, let me
Correct.
not consider her business. I think investors are looking for a profitable, scalable
me tell you-
opportunity.
Okay,
Vikram,
let me ask you that
there's some-
question. No, hang on. You run the Indian Angel Network. You're probably the largest in looking
So
at
I
new
am-
startups. Is there a factor? Is it somewhere that you're registering either positively or negatively? Is this person a female or a male startup?
So I'll make 2 points. Firstly, first answer to your question, absolutely not. I personally invested in 100 companies.
Can you
It
explain why
makes
only
no-
9% then? Can you
no,
explain
let me-
that
no, let me-
situation, why it
No,
is?
I'll answer that
Because these
question.
are new
No, I'll answer
ecosystems
that
being
question.
created.
I'll answer
So
that.
how come
I
women
will
are
answer-
not there?
I'll answer
No,
that
no, there are
question.
two reasons. One
No,
is
no,
that
no.
there's discrimination
No, I
against
will-
women,
no, no.
or for some reason
No,
women
no,
are
no.
not doing
Vikram.
enough startups.
So
No,
enabling
Vikram,
environment,
Vikram.
that's what I'm
Also
saying.
No, but then they need to be encouraged to do it. You can't say the system
Vikram,
is against
Vikram,
them.
let- no,
So
no,
that's the
no,
only point
please,
I'm trying to
let me-
understand.
9%
No,
of
let
what?
me, no,
So
let
this is
me,
9.
let me
No,
answer
let
that.
me
No,
come
let
to-
me,
yeah.
guys, let me just answer that. There's a general issue of percentage of women in corporate world in India, around the world as well, even in India, and in the upper echelon. This is a general issue. It's not just startups. So if you look at startups, it is not, there's no bias of not having women. When I invest, when angel groups invest, VCs invest, makes no difference to them who's standing in front, woman or man. It's just that there are fewer women who are coming up for the investment. So fewer get invested in. I'll give you a very simple example. It's just a question of more and more women coming up.
It's
And
Looking at
I
funding,
It's like a
And
chicken
getting
and egg
successful.
situation,
No,
right?
Vikram, yes, this is the
If
thing.
more women aren't starting startups, they won't get funded.
So I have
And
two
the
points
good
to
news
make.
is-
but then
they're
why
not
news
women
starting.
are
is
not
Yeah.
coming forward?
That if you look at the trend line
It's a
from our
traditional
reports,
argument, you know, that
it's
women are
going
not there.
up by 2% every year. It was 8% the previous year, now it is 10%, so it's going up. So I think that's a positive sign. Though 10% is still quite low, but it's an upward trend.
No,
I would
no,
be
but
more
it's-
worried
I
if
give
it
you
was
some data.
More than that, can I ask you about it? There's a cultural issue, right? And the fact, the possibility of getting
Definitely there
sexual
is.
harassment or the ill treatment of women in startups. Sometimes, and by the way, it's not just here. If you hear some of the accounts about startups, even in America, where it's a college dorm sort of a situation, and the way women are sometimes treated is not good.
That's true, yeah.
Is that a bigger problem, you think, than the fact that women are not getting funded?
Well, you see, there are two things. One, of course, just like any other sector of economy, politics, wherever you're looking, people say women are not there, women are not coming forward. That is why colleges, engineering colleges, education, everywhere you see, the argument is a traditional argument that women are not there because women don't come forward. So that's why women are not there. The other argument is that how much capacity of women have been built, how much enabling environment has been created for women to come forward.
But that somebody else has
when
to
you
sort
are-
it out.
when
That you
are
can't blame
sexual-
angel
there are
investors
two
or
points.
startup
No, but
ecosystem. That's the
startups
education
are-
problem. Why
No,
aren't
Vikram,
parents sending
my
their girls?
problem is
Why
that-
aren't parents allowing women to take
But
up
that is a very
startups?
important point.
But
That's
Vikram-
a different issue.
Yes, that's a very important point.
but
Because
Vikram-
before we
Just
go
let
to
me
our
complete.
But
startup,
Vikram, the
complete
startup
for one
system,
second. Let me
startup
complete.
ecosystem is
Just
actually
one
doing
second.
something about
One
it.
second.
Yeah.
I think let me complete my point is that it's just the way the whole ecosystem was re-engineered with startups, and the new ideas were infused, supposed to have been infused. That means there has to be a workplace gender policy. That means there should have
I
been
agree
sexual
with that.
harassment at work
Absolutely.
committee. That means that
Absolutely.
so many
And
other
that's a
things.
valid point.
So
That's a
why
valid
are
point.
you
Let me give you some data
Sexual
points.
harassment,
representing
for
the same
example, many startups are remiss in having things like the Vishaka guidelines and other things that
Yeah,
are
so
That's
supposed to be
because
happening.
you've made them into islands that are perhaps not accountable in a traditional sense of speaking.
I don't think that's true.
It is.
So, in my company,
the board can take
25% plus folks are women. The senior management, women are
That's an
represented
IT.
by around 30%. So
That's
it's
IT.
That's IT.
when we talk about women coming into the startup force, there are a lot of practical challenges. Look at the safety, look at the infrastructure, right? So all of that, the government has to make sure that if you really want to fix those 9%, 30% numbers, make it safe for women to come out, because startups are a lot of work. So women are sometimes not wanting to do that because they don't get the support from their family because it's unsafe for them. And where do you draw the line? It's unsafe.
Okay.
It's
And
not-
so
Simon,
the last thing on women I want to say that at TIE, actually we have created a special interest group which is focused only on how to encourage more women to create startups.
But then
at the
15,
Angel,
2015
at the
report
Angel
says
network,
that 36%.
No, I'm
But see, every board
That
has
is
the
irrelevant.
right.
Can we all all right, let me just quickly move to another issue, which is of course what happened right now with Stay Zilla. What can vendors do, not do? A particularly strange case, voodoo dolls, death threats, spending a certain period of time in prison, led to a number of founders saying that, look, this is really putting into question the entire startup ecosystem. In fact, very strong letter from founders to Rajnath Singh this week saying what Yogi and his family are going through now makes India look like a nightmarish choice to become an entrepreneur. Very, very strong words out there. We do have Ravindra Krishnappa with us, angel investor, also somebody who was a former board member at Stay Zilla itself. Thanks a lot, Ravindra, for being with us. There will be disputes. There will be times when vendors and people will fight. But arrests, people being thrown into prison, prolonged periods of police custody, does that put a question mark over the startup ecosystem?
So absolutely yes. I mean, let's take this particular case in point, right? So there is actually so one of the things that I would like to clarify is there is no dispute. The dispute is in the value that is owed, not in the fact that there is money owed, right? That's step number one. And two, I think there is a very high level piece that we need to go back and address that. In this particular case, it is a structured shutdown. So what do I mean by structured shutdown? There's enough money left in the bank to pay off all the employees. So this is not a case where the founder is running away. He's organized for all the employees to be paid out. All the statutory dues are getting cleared out. So, and there is still money left in the bank. So this is a case where somebody feels that they need to be treated as a vendor. They need to be treated ahead of somebody else, and then thinks that they can get away with arm twisting to get the end result that they want. I mean, that's how I see it.
Look, startups will succeed, startups will fail. But the minute you think that, oh, I could get thrown into prison for that, that's when you start, unless you've done some fraud. If you've done fraud, you try to defalcate money,
so
you've done something, of course you should be arrested. But
Correct. So
there will be startups that will have a problem.
So as an entrepreneur, so let me just add another point. What is scary in this particular case is the manner that he was picked up. His phone or his contact to the external one was taken away, and he was presented in front of a magistrate at 9:45 p.m.
So that's normal,
Right?
What's wrong with
That is just
I mean,
before.
I don't
And those
understand
are
that
the
there
things
is
that
an
you need to go
issue
back.
there.
But
I don't
why is,
understand there's
I
a-
heard you saying that's normal. Is
Why
that what
should
you
that
No,
be
no,
normal?
no. But then in case in other
Why
all the
should
other
that be normal?
cases, in all
That
the
is
other
a travesty
cases,
of
look,
the
timing
Indian
is not
criminal
look.
justice system.
hang on,
Absolutely
hang on,
abnormal.
hang on, hang on.
Why one
It's
person will
unacceptable.
be treated? First of all, if
It
all
would be
that
wrong in
money is
anybody's
there,
case.
no,
You can't
listen
say
to me.
because it happens to
I
other
agree.
people.
Vikram, if all that
Yeah.
money
This
is in
is
the
not a
bank,
criminal
why
offense.
the people have not been paid
It's
so
going to take
far?
time.
No,
Process
no,
of
no,
shutting
no,
it
no,
off.
no,
Hang on.
understood.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, let me get you in.
No,
Mr.
you have
Chandrasekhar,
to
Mr. Chandrasekhar, hang on one second. Yeah, Mr. Chandrasekhar, let me get you in.
I'm saying that that's how the police
I
function.
think
That's-
one of the
that's what I
issues that
said.
we are going to face in the startup ecosystem and elsewhere, a point which you made, it's very difficult to start a company. It's even tougher to shut it down. Now, yes, a new bankruptcy code has come, but the government needs to figure this out because companies will fail. And in fact, 80% of startups will fail, maybe 90% of startups will fail. Now, if at the back of your mind is a risk that, look, if my startup is going to fail, I could get thrown into prison, or I could be arrested, or my family could have death threats addressed to them, a lot fewer people will want to go down that route. In the absence of evidence that somebody has committed fraud, then we need to be a little bit careful as to how the failure of that startup will be dealt with.
Yeah.